Thank you, son. Is it on? Hear me? Yes. Good. Good. Thank you, Peter, and thank all of you for coming to our first, which I hope will be of many events for this great group that Peter and Glenn started. So thank you to begin with. I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker tonight, the Honorable Roy Altman. Let me just start off by saying that he was confirmed by a seat for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida on April 4th, 2019. At 36 years of age, he became the youngest federal district court judge in the country and the youngest federal court judge ever appointed to the Southern District in Florida. Judge Altman received his BA from Columbia University, where he played quarterback on the football team and pitched for the baseball team, earning all Ivy honors. Judge Altman received his JD from Yale Law School, where he was the project's editor of the Yale Law Journal. After law school, he clerked for the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals for the Honorable Stanley Marcus. When Judge Altman was being questioned by the Judiciary Committee for his appointment, one of the U.S. senators asked him, "What do you think is the most important characteristic of a federal court judge?" Judge Altman immediately responded and said, "Rahmanis." And what does that mean? And Judge Altman said, "It is a Yiddish word, and it means mercy, compassion, and empathy, and being aware of those that are subject to criticism and care for the collective Jewish value." Well, it's with that word, Rahmanis, that I think Judge Altman exhibits every day on the bench. And it's with that empathy and with that desire to speak truthfully that he has written a book called Israel on Trial, and I've passed out on all the tables is a bookmark with the ability to pre-order. And I can't tell you, Judge Altman, how pleased we are that you came to speak at our first event. And I know you have great remarks. I'm going to ask you as part of it to tell us why you wrote this book and what are things you're doing to combat some of the issues that we're facing.
That football and baseball career, by the way, some of you asked about it, that was 2 knee surgeries ago, so it's not that impressive anymore. I heard what Peter said, the way he introduced tonight and his motivations in starting this group. And actually, this isn't part of my talk, but I should tell you that I had a very similar experience. On October 7th at night, we were getting messages from family and friends all over Israel, terrified, really not understanding what had happened. And my wife and I were, I guess you call it doom scrolling all night, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. These people were beheaded, these families were burned alive. And then the next day, the news just got worse and worse and worse, and it was 200 people dead, 600 people dead, 2,000 people are still missing. And yet on college campuses all over this country, my alma maters, Columbia and Yale, places I was once so proud of, we Jews became the oppressors. Then became clear that hundreds of women and girls were violently raped. That's now clear beyond peradventure. You can go on YouTube tonight and watch videos of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists admitting on camera that it was a part of their plan. And yet, at the United Nations, we Jews became the violators of human rights. They took 251 of us hostage, octogenarians, septuagenarians, 12 Holocaust survivors, 24 infants and toddlers, including 2 boys, Kfir and Ariel Bibas, who Hamas claimed were killed by an Israeli bombardment, but all forensic evidence has shown were actually strangled in a tunnel underground by human hands, 10 months and 4 years old. And yet, in Western media outlets, we Jews have become the aggressors. At one point, after 3 or 4 nights of not sleeping, my wife on her phone, me on my phone in the bed, she reached out and grabbed my hand. I think we had forgotten that we hadn't slept in 3 days. Must have been October 10th. And I looked over at her, and she had a single tear coming down her cheek. And she said to me, "How is it that 80 years after the Holocaust, we are all still all alone?" And then something amazing happened. On October 8th and 9th and 10th and 11th, friends of ours who weren't Jewish, especially my colleagues as federal judges around the country, started texting and calling and coming to see us, telling us that they stood with the Jewish people, that they stood with the only Jewish state in the world, and that they wanted me to show them Israel so they could see it through their own eyes. And so I started to plan the first ever judicial education mission to Israel. And we've now taken federal judges to Israel in 2023, 2 trips in 2024. We took a trip in 2025, and I've got 23 judges lined up for 2 months from now, March of 2026. I've now taken 10% of the entire active federal judiciary in the United States, and we've raised enough money, I can tell you now, to take every federal judge in America who ever wants to go forever, along with now every state Supreme Court justice in the country. And so I will be leading every year, twice a year, once in March, a trip of federal judges to Israel, and every September or October, right after the holidays, a trip of state Supreme Court justices to Israel. That second part my wife doesn't know about yet, but I'll tell her when I get back. It's fascinating because these judges, if you're the governor of Arkansas or North Dakota, you're going to be gone in a couple years. These federal judges, the reality is we're here for life, whether you like us or not. And they're the most influential people in these states. And I've gotten to go back to these judges and their communities in almost all 50 states in the last 2 years. And generally on the show, I'm the speaker at their churches, their kids' high schools, their local colleges and law schools. But it's much more interesting for me to watch and listen how they speak about us in their communities. And I want to tell you tonight that although you won't read about it in The Guardian or the New York Times, the way people talk about us and feel about us all over this country, it would give you a level of inspiration that you're probably lacking here in New York City. And I want to tell you that over the last 2 years, each judge I have taken to Israel has sent me a letter in one form or another. And if you come to my chambers after we have some Israeli food, I'll take you around because I've framed them all. They're all up in my chambers. And the letters are amazing because these judges, many of them don't know each other. They're from different states. Almost none of them are Jewish. They've never been to Israel before. They're of almost every Christian variety. They're Orthodox, they're Catholic, they're Lutheran, Methodist, Baptist, and everything in between. We've even taken a Baha'i judge. But even though they don't know each other and didn't coordinate their letters, if you were to come to my chambers and read the letters as I do all the time, you would notice that each of the letters says some variety of the following. That aside from marriage and children and their appointment as federal judges, these trips to Israel were the most transformative events of their whole lives. And they tell us why. And I'd like to use the remainder of my time here with you tonight to tell you about three of the most common refrains, three of the most common reasons these judges give for that proposition. The first is that Israel is a place with people who are resilient and optimistic about the future in ways that are almost bananas to us here. Every year, I think it's a kind of penalty, I'm invited to be the admitted student day speaker at Yale Law School. Somehow, I get kids who might want to go to Harvard and Stanford and convince them to go to Yale. There was a time when I thought I wouldn't do it anymore, but here again, I just accepted for April. And I tell the kids every year that when you go around the happiness rankings of countries around the world, we in the United States, despite all our wealth, we're really kind of middle of the road. You know, every happiness ranking that has come out in the last 20 years, including in the last two of war, has shown Israel in the top 5 happiness rankings of countries all over the world. And you think to yourself, these people are surrounded by hundreds of millions of people who want to destroy them. There's only between 7 and 10 million of them, depending on the year. There's constant war, bombardments, rocket fire, hostage-taking, terrorist attacks. Are they insane? It's not that they're insane. It's that every happiness study that has ever been conducted, including by Robert Putnam at Harvard and Arthur Brooks, who now writes for the New York Times, has shown that people are happiest and healthiest when they live in service of a cause that is greater than they are, when they live in service of one another. And there is something about Israeli society. When I go to the lawyer's office or the banker's office or the dentist's office, I don't know that person at all. But I know one thing about them before I meet them, that that person was willing to give the most important thing in his or her life, his or her children, just as I have, for the defense of this idea that there should be one place that Jews can call home. There are 57 Muslim countries in the world, 22 Arab countries in the world. But for too many Americans, it's just too much to have one tiny Jewish country in the world. But those people are there and they're fighting for it. And I want to tell you the first story that exemplifies that from our judges trip. Our first judges trip, 15 federal judges to Israel in the beginning of March of 2024, right after the war started, with rockets falling from all sides. In fact, I'll just tell you a story. I was at the Carlton in Tel Aviv with a bunch of judges. I was going to take them out on a run on the boardwalk in Tel Aviv along the beach. And I was listening to Call Me Back, Dan Senor's podcast. And suddenly the Israeli security guards start freaking out. It's like 6 in the morning. And I'm like, what is it? They were like, so I take off the headphones, and there I heard it. A rocket from Lebanon coming towards us. All these American judges from Georgia and Arkansas and Kentucky got to get into the bunker, and down we go. But you know, I'm an optimist, like Israelis. So I figured I was still going to go out there, so I started, stretching my calves. I'm kind of old now, so I do that, pushing up against the wall this way. And one of the Israelis, he comes to me, the security guards, he goes, Judge, I know you Americans don't know too much about this, but that is not going to hold up the walls. Anyway, on that first trip, towards the end of the trip, we went down to Re'im, to the site of the Nova Music Festival. 364 boys and girls in their prime, 18, 19, 20 years old at a dance party, were butchered alive. They were burned. They were decapitated. Many of the women were gang raped. It's the largest killing of innocent Jews anywhere in the world since the camps were freed in 1945. And many of you have probably been there or seen the memorial they've created on the internet. They've created quite a powerful memorial, one mound of dirt where each person fell. And out of the mound is a wooden or metal stick with a picture of the person who was killed there and a story about the boy or the girl. Anyway, we, the judges, we come off the bus. I come off first, they behind me. And suddenly we were completely overwhelmed by the shrieking sobs of a woman who was lying prostrate over the mound of her son. And her friends and family were all around her, and they were trying to pull her off. She was probably this close to us as we came off the bus. But she would dig her nails into the earth, and she would not be moved. We would come to learn later that that was her son's birthday. And her shrieking and her sobbing, the judges, we just kind of crowded around her, and frankly, it was a little awkward. And so I thought to myself, well, we got to get out of here. So I started walking over towards the right, and we came to a clearing. And I recognized the clearing because you see, we were shown, and in every judge's trip have watched, the 47-minute horror video of Hamas's atrocities, filmed on GoPro cameras and oftentimes the victims' own cell phones, and uploaded onto the victims' social media feeds, so that at 6, 7 in the morning, when her family would wake up and read the newspaper, the first thing her parents would see is a video of her being raped and killed on her social media feed. And this video is unbearable. The Israelis made a huge mistake. They didn't show it to the world for a long time. Only a few journalists and politicians and we, the judges, were shown the video. The Israelis tell me I may be the only person in the world who's seen it 4 times. My wife keeps telling me not to watch it. But I tell her, how can I bring these Christian, non-Jewish judges to Israel? Get them in a room, have them stow their phones away and sign an affidavit, and then say this is going to be the worst 47 minutes of your life. Don't worry, I'll be on the other side of that door. It doesn't work that way. So I endure it, I bear it. Things no person should ever have to endure. And at the very end of that video, an IDF soldier shows up at the music festival. It's now early afternoon, 4 o'clock. The Palestinian militants have been killing people all day long. And he comes to this clearing, the same clearing we were standing on. And it was that clearing where the bar of the music festival was. You've probably seen this on your phones. It was a long rectangular bar with a low peripheral wall. And you can see everything through the soldier's body cam footage. And he yells out in Hebrew, Mishu Chai. Mishu Chai. Is anyone alive? And then he looks over the low wall of the bar, and it's unbelievable. It's like Schindler's List, but in color. Bodies of Jewish kids in mini skirts just piled on top of one another. Bullet holes everywhere. I had a kid at Harvard Law School tell me, wearing a keffiyeh, oh, Hamas doesn't kill civilians. Unbelievable stuff. Harvard Law School. That's where we were. And I came onto that clearing, now filled with flower petals, and I thought I heard music, and I thought I was going crazy. But I looked up, and there I saw them, maybe as far away as the folks who were standing in the back. And this group of about 50 women had formed a giant circle. And they said to me, please join us. And so I did. And we locked arms in arm, and then I noticed, I thought I was alone, but it turns out all these judges never been to Israel. Of course, they're just following me. They had followed me all the way to the circle. And they started interspersing themselves along the circle too. Judges from Georgia and Kentucky and Arkansas and New York and California and Idaho and all over the country. And we locked all of us arm in arm, and then the ladies began to sing. And you know what we sang? We sang Hatikvah. And I thought, what an unbelievable symbol of these people. Here, in this sacrosanct, hallowed place, where more innocent Jews were raped and butchered than any other place on earth since 1945, these 50 women had left whatever they were doing on a Thursday in Tel Aviv and rented a big bus and taken the day off work to drive 2 hours down to the south by Gaza with an ongoing war to sing a song, not of vengeance or vindictiveness or of hate, but of hope. Because that's what Hatikvah means. It means hope. Hope for each other. Hope for their country. Hope for that land for which they and their ancestors and your ancestors have fought for 3,000 years. That's the kind of resilience, the kind of optimism, the kind of love these judges have told me they have never witnessed before. The second reason these trips are so transformational, our judges tell us, is that Israel is a place where miracles still happen. On our first judges trip in the middle of the war, I said to my dad, I said, Papi, I'm Venezuelan. So we talk in Spanish. I said, Papi, I'm a little nervous. You know, what if something happens and 25 federal judges get hurt and it's all on me? He said, don't worry. Israel will come through for you. It always does. We go to Israel. It's Ash Wednesday. And I was a little nervous. I'm not a very anxious guy, as you've probably noticed. I was a little anxious because all these judges have come from all over the country because they trust me to Israel in the middle of a war. And I didn't want them to think that they had done that for me and the Jewish people, but I didn't have the decency to find them a proper Ash Wednesday service. So I was calling in the weeks before synagogues in Tel Aviv, churches in Tel Aviv, to see if we could put on a proper Ash Wednesday service for the judges. The issue was that that was the day that we were going to go north to Syria and Lebanon and visit the Druze community up there. And so we had to leave very early at 7 in the morning. So I'd call these churches and I'd say, hey, you got a service for 20 federal judges from America? They'd be like, oh, wonderful, of course. And I'd be like, can you do it at 6 in the morning? And then they'd be like, no, absolutely not. So the day came and we had no plan for a service with the judges. And we went up north and had an unbelievable experience up there. I'll just tell you about one of them. We went to a town called Majdal Shams. Have you heard about this town? Yes. You know, at Colombia, they think that Israel's an apartheid state. You've heard of that? Yeah. The Druze community of Syria and Lebanon have just voted to be annexed to Israel. These are Arabs who want to be Israeli on pain of death. If we're doing apartheid, we're doing a real bad job of it. Okay, folks? So we went to Majdal Shams. Majdal Shams is a tiny Druze community, actually an ancient community, almost 1,000 years old, that is in the Golan Heights, in the mountains, right on the border with Syria. And in the summer of 2024, Majdal Shams changed the entire course of this war because a Hezbollah rocket fired from Lebanon fell onto the soccer field of Majdal Shams while a large group of Druze children, Arab Druze children, were playing soccer on the field. And 12 little boys and girls were brutally killed on the soccer field. And so we, the judges, went up to the soccer field at Majdal Shams, and we had an incredibly moving and emotional ceremony with the families, the parents and siblings of the kids who were killed, by the way, all of whom were wearing the yellow hostage pin in solidarity with their Jewish brothers and sisters in captivity. And the field is still preserved. It still is, actually, totally charred black by the rocket. And it was extremely emotional. And then we get back onto the bus. We had lunch there. Actually, before we had lunch, I had to pee, so we went into the gym. And I noticed there was a basketball game of all these ninth graders. So next thing you know, I'm in the basketball game. I blocked a kid's shot, and the Israelis are like, "What are you doing?" You know, that's a whole separate conversation. Anyway, we get back onto the bus, and any of you who've ever been on one of these trips to Israel, you know the Israelis are like, yada, 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 we're late. And we're always an hour late to meet this person or to go to the Supreme Court or the Attorney General or whoever it is. But this time, the Israelis came to me on the bus, and they said, "Judge, I don't know how it happened, but we are actually an hour early today. This is our first miracle," okay? So now we're traveling from Majd al-Shams in the northeastern part of the country, the Golan Heights, and we're going to a concert by the Special in Uniform Band. Does anybody know what Special in Uniform is? A few people do. That's a shame. Now I have to tell you about that, so we're going to have to go over my time. I'm sorry. I hope that's okay, Peter. So Special in Uniform is a program that the Israeli army created because every year, every 17-year-old in Israel, or not every, but most, this is very controversial, get a letter from the army that tells them to show up at a particular place on a particular day in order to try out for their army unit, except for the several thousand kids with disabilities who are told that they are exempted from military service because they're autistic or in a wheelchair, or whatever the case may be. About 10 years ago, the father of one such child realized that this is a huge impediment to these children in a society where socioeconomic advancement is so dependent on your army service. Here, you go to a bar, you meet a girl. Where did you go to law school? Yale. That's impressive. There, nobody cares where you went to law school. They care what unit you were in. And so a lot of these kids were being disadvantaged by virtue of not having gone to the military. So he pitched the Israeli army, and in a very Israeli way, the army decided to begin a program called Special in Uniform for these kids, initially as a form of including them in the broader societal outreach. But in typical Israeli fashion, these kids are unbelievable. And they now perform roles all over the military, in the Air Force, in the Navy, in the standing army, that no person without these disabilities could have performed. I'll give you one example. We were at the Arrow factory. Arrow is the series of rockets that Israel has built, just sold them to Germany, to intercept Iranian ballistic missiles in outer space at hypersonic speed, the only country in the world ever to do it in practice. And at the facility where the Arrow rockets are built, there is an autistic girl whose job it is to find every nut, screw, and bolt when things go wrong, and she has every part and the drawer and floor and office in which it is located completely memorized. And they tested her in front of us in ways that would absolutely blow your mind. But the point is that some of these kids are actually wonderful musicians, as you might imagine. So the Army has created a Special in Uniform band, which we, the judges, were going to see perform in an amphitheater in Caesarea by the sea, which is west. So going from northeast to west, with an hour to spare, we had to cross what? The Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. And I had my first brilliant thought, well, there must be a church on the Sea of Galilee, you know. So I went into my phone and I typed in the following: Church, Sea of Galilee. Very sophisticated search. And would you believe it, like 50 churches showed up. And I literally just called the first one, the Church of the Primacy of St. Peter. Anybody ever been there? All right, you're in for a treat. You should visit next time. We get to this, I call this church, the priest picks up, and I tell him that we've got 23 federal judges from America who desperately need an Ash Wednesday service, and he says, "Praise Jesus." And I said, "Well, why praise Jesus?" And he says, "Well, Judge, about 20 minutes ago, my supervising priest came to me and said, Father, go home, it's the afternoon. Anyone who's wanted an Ash Wednesday service has had one. No one else is coming back here today. And I said to him, Father, I have a premonition that I should stay for 20 or 30 more minutes. And 20 minutes later, you call with 23 federal judges who need an Ash Wednesday service from America. And I said, praise Jesus. This is our second miracle, in case you're counting. So we show up at the Church of the Primacy of St. Peter. And let me tell you, folks, this is no ordinary church, okay? First of all, the church itself was built in the 300s AD. That's over 1,700 years ago, for those of you scoring at home. And it is directly between the Mount of the Beatitudes, where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, and the Sea of Galilee's shore itself. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand. When I say that it is on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, I mean that if I am the wall, the stone wall of the church, what's your name again? You asked all the great questions. Caitlin, the question asker. She would be the shore of the Sea of Galilee, lapping up against the rocks of the church. So we get to the Church of the Primacy of St. Peter, and the judges pour out of this bus, and they're so overwhelmed by the Mount of the Beatitudes, the Sea of Galilee, the ancient church, that off come their shoes and their socks. They roll up their pants, and all of them pour into the Sea of Galilee, frolicking and dancing and splashing one another. And finally, the priest comes up to me and he says, Judge, at a certain point, I do have to go home. Can you get the judges out of the sea? And I said, sure. So I get the judges out. We get them all dressed. We come into the church, and that's when we see it. The church was built around a stone. You've seen this sometimes. There are hotels that are built around a tree, or Odysseus' home was built around the tree that he made his bed out of, just like that. This stone is enormous. It takes up about 30% of the church. It's about 12 or 14 feet long and 6 or 7 feet wide. It's the stone that the gospel tells us Jesus, when he comes down from the Mount of the Beatitudes and is hungry and wants to have bread and fish with the disciples, there's no table, they eat off of the stone. That is the stone. Now, the stone is surrounded by signs that say, don't touch it, but they're all in Hebrew. So onto the stone, all the judges go, kissing and touching the stone. And the priest comes to me and goes, Judge, get the judges off the stone. And I said, Father, nobody's touched that stone in 2,000 years. Let the judges kiss the stone, And we had the most moving Ash Wednesday service any of these judges will ever have. They've told me that until the day they die, they will remember that day. And as you see Christian holy sites being desecrated from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon, and just last week in the Palestinian territories, remember that Israel has poured more money into protecting the Christian holy sites than any other non-Christian country in the world has ever done. And these judges saw that too. The third thing, and the last thing our judges tell us about our trips to Israel, is that Israel is the place where the claim of colonialism, that Jews are now colonists in our own ancient homeland, the notion that Jews and Christians are different and should be at odds with one another, becomes on its face absurd. When Jesus was born, he was born in a town called Beit Lechem, which means in Hebrew, house of bread. It's now a Palestinian town after the Arabs invaded in 636 AD. It's called Bethlehem in English. He was born there in a fully Jewish town, which had been Jewish for thousands of years when he was born. He moved when he was 1 or 2 years old to the Kinneret, to the Sea of Galilee. And there he became a great rabbi, and he preached all along the Galilee. And he came in his 30s to Jerusalem. And when he came to Jerusalem, he washed himself, as all Jews did at the temple, in a mikveh. And the mikveh was called the Siloam pool. And the Siloam pool, the Gospels tell us, led 750 meters, which Jesus walked from the pool up to the Temple Mount, through the Siloam Road, the pilgrimage road. And we know what happened at the Temple Mount. He fought with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the money changers at the temple. The Palestinian claim has always been that this is all Zionist and Christian propaganda, just fantasy. No such thing as Jews in the land of Israel before the 1800s. That's the claim. You want to give it a patina of reasonableness, you try as hard as you can. Go read what they say. That's what Mahmoud Abbas's PhD is all about. Well, unfortunately for that, well, what do you guys are all great defense lawyers, right? You know what you do. You want to take the guy's deposition before you turn over the video, right? We want to hear what he says before he gets to get his story straight. Well, unfortunately for this narrative, just a few years ago, archaeologists have found underneath the ground the Siloam pool and the pilgrimage road, and they have measured the length of the road from the pool, the mikveh, up to the Temple Mount, and guess how long it is? Almost precisely 750 meters, just as the Bible tells us. Now, it's not open to the public yet, but the finds in this pilgrimage road underground are astonishing. Every day, it seems, they are finding little medallions and bullae and other ceramic items that are thousands of years old, written not in Arabic, folks, not in Polish, because you're not from Poland. I was told at Columbia last year to go back to Poland. That's not where I'm from. It's written in crisp, unambiguous Hebrew that anyone who had their bar or bat mitzvah could read. And they're thousands of years old. So we go down into the Siloam Road. It's dark and it's damp. We're deep underground. And one of our judges, he asks, I think, an innocent question. He says to the guide, how far down would we have to go to get to the stones Jesus himself would have walked on? And our guide says, no, you have it all wrong. These are the stones. And at that, all of the judges get on our hands and knees and start touching the stones. And then I noticed something glistening in the interstices between two of the stones. And I went over to it, being the only one not on my hands and knees. And I pulled out my iPhone and turned on the flashlight, as one does. And I got on my hands and knees too. And I looked over, and there it was, a gold or silver coin stuck into the stone. And guess what was emblazoned on it? A menorah, thousands of years old. And then I looked over, we were on this 2x4 or so stone. I looked over at one of the other judges, not like in a creepy or weird way, who was on his hands and knees too. And we instantly recognized right then and there that we were at the spot where Judaism and Christianity were still one family, where we were one, where we were born, our ancient homeland, our joint family, our home. I'll close with this. Every judge's trip starts the same way, at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem. And many of you have been to Yad Vashem, I assume. You know it well. It's a long, triangular, single-room structure. You start on the far left side, and the triangular wall has a black and white movie playing on it. I see many of you nodding. You remember the movie. The movie moves from left to right. And the movie shows the whole rich vibrancy of Jewish life all over Europe. In all its immense diversity, and security. You've got the Orthodox Jews, 2 men, one of them holding his son with their taluses on, heading to synagogue on Yom Kippur in Poland. You've got more Reform Jewish girls in bathing suits at a swim meet in Germany. You've got a Pesach Seder in Latvia, and on and on and on. Many of these communities, for those of you who like history, you know they're as old as the Roman Empire, thousands of years old. Our American Jewish community pales in comparison to how ancient, to how ingrained these Jewish communities were in Europe, to how secure they had been since the Jew was emancipated in France and Germany in the 19th century. And then, towards the end of the film, if you'll recall it, there's a few teachers getting a group of little boys and girls together. It's about 50 little boys and girls. And they get them into rows in these bleachers. You remember this? And then the movie ends. And you don't know what they're getting them onto the bleachers for. And our tour guide at Yad Vashem, he's the chief archivist of Yad Vashem, an amazing guy. And he tells us, you know, one of the projects at Yad Vashem was to go through and find every person in this movie. And you know what they found? Some crazy percentage of it, I'm going to get it wrong, 95, 98% of every child, man, woman, and elderly person in that movie was murdered in the Holocaust. And then you walk through the entire museum, through the Warsaw Ghetto, and the killing fields of Babi Yar, and the crematoria at Auschwitz, and you come out through the other side, all the way on the right of that long triangular structure. And where you're standing at the very end, you can look back and see the movie in black and white playing on the opposite wall, right? And you've forgotten about that movie by now. 2-3 hours later it took you. But then right before you come out from the other side, there's a television there. And it's in black and white. And what is it? It's those teachers gathering those little children again onto the bleachers. Now you're going to get to see the end of the movie. They line up in the bleachers and they sing a song. And what do they sing in 1930s Germany, before the state of Israel was refounded? They sing Hatikva, the anthem of hope of the Jewish people. And then you walk out of the museum, the doors open, and there you are in the foothills of a suburban neighborhood in Jerusalem the Jews have made flourish, the Jews have redeemed. Even a dollar like me understands the symbolism. If the army of the Jewish people, if the state of Israel had existed in 1933, those Jewish boys and girls would have lived. If the army of the Jewish people and the state of Israel had existed in 1933, those ancient Jewish communities of Israel would have survived. On October 7th and 8th and 9th, judges all over Israel like me, and lawyers like you, and dentists and doctors and accountants and businessmen and women like your spouses and children and parents, they took off their robes, they turned off the lights of their offices, they went home and they kissed their wives and children goodnight, and they grabbed their guns and they put on their uniforms and they went to fight, and for 915 of them, they went to die in the streets of Gaza and Lebanon and Syria. Don't ever forget what Yad Vashem means. When they went to die and give their lives They did it not just for the people who lived in their country. They did it for every Jew in the world. They did it for the Jewish communities in this country and in Europe and in Australia. They died for each and every one of you, so that if our Jewish community here in the United States or in Australia or Belgium or Netherlands or France were to collapse as they have so many times before, you and you and you and all of you would have a place to go. Don't ever forget that. Thank you all very much.